I'm Lee Morgan, your host. I would like to welcome you to the premiere of Spotlight on Mental Health. Dr. Morgan and myself will be talking about all aspects of mental health, how to identify symptoms and where to find help. What is mental health? Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. Over the course of your life, if you experience mental health problems, your thinking, mood, and behavior could be affected. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as genes or brain chemistry, life experiences such as trauma or abuse, and family history of mental health problems. Mental health problems are common, but help is available. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Patricia Morgan, your co-host for this program. Dr. Morgan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Lee. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a PhD in human development from Virginia Tech. I have over 30 years of experience in the field of mental health. I specialize in working with adults who have been traumatized in their childhood, and then their trauma shows itself for the first time maybe at midlife in issues of depression, anxiety, other mental disorders, as well as difficulty with regard to marriage and career issues. Researchers at the Kaiser Family Foundation found a 300% correlation between trauma in childhood and illnesses at age 30 to 50. This is when clients start experiencing anxiety attacks, depression, that really have been lying dormant since childhood. It is my belief that most mental health issues have their early roots in shame, guilt, neglect, and abuse. I recently started with a client, age 31. Jenny came to me and talked about the abuse that happened to her in her childhood. She has never had a romantic relationship, and she's 31. She is having a hard time committing to any career path. And she even told me that if a coffee shop starts knowing what she's going to order, she goes to a different coffee shop. She doesn't want to make a commitment.
Most of us have one of the most common things that we have in our society, and that's depression. Do you agree?
Yes, it's a very common ailment. Many times people are depressed and they don't even know it. Whenever someone comes to me and they complain about depression, before I see them, I have them complete a Burns Depression Scale checklist, which lists 25 issues that are portraying depression. This is a very valid test. It's been tested in many, many research venues, and you can find it on the internet under Burns Depression Checklist. Some of the items on the list are problems with thoughts and feelings. Do you feel sad or down in the dumps? Feeling unhappy or blue? Crying spells or tearfulness? Feeling discouraged? Then under activities and personal relationships, loss of interest in family, loneliness, spending less time with family and friends, loss of motivation. Then under physical symptoms, feeling tired, sleeping too little or too much, decreased or increased appetite. And then in suicidal urges, which of course is the most important, do you have suicidal thoughts? Would you like to end your life? Do you have a plan for harming yourself? And so you put a check along any of these if you don't, not at all, that you don't have that at all, or 1, you have it somewhat, 2, moderately, 3, a lot, and 4, extremely. So the higher your score, then the more depressed you are. And many people don't even know that they're depressed after I look at this. I also use this depression checklist to help me come up with goals in which to work with the client on, because those are the areas where they've moved, where they've marked extreme. And so that really is something that everyone that's seeing this program should really go on the internet and find the Burns Depression Scale checklist and take it and see. And if you come up with a high depression score, please visit your family physician and you can ask them for antidepressants, which can be very helpful. Antidepressants, however, take about 3 or 4 weeks to get into your bloodstream. But you also really need to be talking to somebody weekly, because you're having to do a lot of changing really in terms of how you think, the kind of things that are important to you. And so just taking medication is not the answer. You really should be involved in weekly psychotherapy as well.
I would say that probably in addition to depression, one of the other similar type situations where people are suffering from anxiety. Can you explain what that involves and how that's going to affect their lives?
Anxiety is a state where you're worried, fretful all the time. You don't know really what it's about. You just are worried and fretful all the time. One of the most common issues that hospital emergency rooms get is panic attacks. A lot of people come with panic attacks, which are extremely terrifying. Your emotions are in control, you aren't. And you never know when it's going to happen. Is it going to last for a long time? Is it going to be short? It's a really, really terrifying experience. And many people come, that being their first symptom, is panic attacks. Recently, I had some clients that had panic attacks during the bad snowstorm that we had last year. And this is when the panic attack first started, was during the snowstorm. Interestingly, that these two people also lived the military life of having to move constantly. And panic attacks are also often connected to loss, a sense of loss. The second issue that I hear all the time that is really also about anxiety is insomnia. It's a very rampant situation in Northern Virginia. People are very stressed, always on the go. They can't sleep. And many people take medication for insomnia, but that really, it is an anxiety issue that they need to look into, again, with their family doctor, and then in therapy to try to help them. For one thing, everybody's being told to put away their cell phone, put away all those things that are always tying us to the real world, to the work world, to shut those all off. That might help them sleep, but a lot of people can't seem to do that. So insomnia and panic attacks are two of the most common anxiety symptoms that people come with for mental health therapy.
I can remember in my lifetime that my sister, who lives in San Diego, she had what we know as bipolar. And I will tell you that that can be a scary situation. I was with her one night, everything was doing just fine, and all of a sudden she went on almost a fit of rage, became very dangerous. We couldn't calm her down. She literally chased me out to my car, and I had to lock the windows because she was banging on the windows, and then I left, and that was the end of it. Only to find her the next day not even remembering any of it, and everything was fine. Of course, I didn't see her anymore while I was there. I was just there visiting my mother. What is the best possible medication that you can give someone who has that? And is it true that if they don't take the medication, which incidentally was my sister's problem, as it turns out, but what about that? Is that something that they might have to take this kind of medication the rest of their lives?
Yes, bipolar is being diagnosed much more often. I got 2 calls today, people being diagnosed bipolar 2, so now there's even a 1 and 2 bipolar. Yes, it's a very serious mental health issue. It requires medication for the rest of your life, and it's when people don't take their medication that things go wrong for them. I'm working with very many people that have that diagnosis. Some of the elements of it is that there also can be mania connected to it. You can be manic and then depressed. And the manic shows itself in spending a lot and thinking that you can save the world. You don't need to sleep. That's a real good clue that if you only need a couple hours of sleep and you used to need 8, that you're in some kind of manic situation. Lithium is a common medication that's used for bipolar, but also there's other antidepressants, Zoloft being one. There's many other, and doctors, psychiatrists particularly, have their own favorite medication that they would have their client take, but it is crucial. Someone was in my office a few weeks ago, and the young woman was not taking her medication for 2 years, and her family was just beside themselves. And now she was taking it, and the father was so upset, and he didn't want to ever have that happen. Yesterday, I had a session with a person I'm working with and his family, and he quit his job, and he didn't let his family know, and he's wanting to move out of the house. Well, his family is wanting me to be involved with them on a really, really ongoing basis because they're so afraid that something's going to happen to him. He's doing fine right now, but last year he was struggling, and so his parents are really frightened that he's going to go back to that kind of life that he was having for a few months. They are hoping that he also goes to a peer group. The parents are going to a peer group for parents of people that have mental illness, and they get so much out of it. They always talk very highly of it, and they were hoping that he will go to a support group too, and I've encouraged him to do that also. In fact, I've had him promise that he will at least go one time to see what it's like being in a peer group and all that he's going to be able to get out of it.
Here's another thing that unfortunately for me, I've had to handle many situations like this. I have a law enforcement background. I've had to handle cases of suicide, not only just attempted suicide, but actual deaths, several of them, using a knife, gun, rope, and all kinds of different means. Most of those situations are so varied that you can't put your finger on any one kind as a symptom to follow through with people who are going to commit suicide. Now, I understand too, you had a patient who was threatening to commit suicide. How is she doing now?
Well, she's been involved in therapy for some time, and just recently shared with somebody that she works with that she was thinking of committing suicide, but instead came for treatment. And the person she was sharing with was telling her that her son had just committed suicide. And so my client could so feel for the mother of this young man. Suicide, I read in the paper recently that they hired more policemen for the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and those policemen have been able to stop several more people from jumping off the bridge. There was also an article about medical students have a high rate of suicide in medical school because the pressures are so great. Suicide is always something you have to listen to. When I first meet people, if they have even thoughts of suicide, I contract with them. I write out that they'll call me if they're thinking of hurting themselves, and they have to sign the contract along with me. If somebody is really has made an attempt, they most likely have to be hospitalized because that's really dangerous. They could have died, and so they need to be placed in the hospital. Whenever somebody's in danger of hurting themselves or other people, they really have to be hospitalized and given the proper medications so they can But, you know, suicidal thoughts can be a very common thing in Northern Virginia, too. It's a very stressful life, and people are very achieving and very hard on themselves, perfectionistic, and so it's easy for people to get disgusted with whatever that they're having to deal with and, you know, saying, oh, I would like to kill myself. So it's a common thing that you hear in Northern Virginia for sure. And there are also been so many drug overdoses, which really is really a killing of yourself slowly if you're on heavy drugs that you're taking that you shouldn't be taking, and then you have an overdose and die from that. You know, that whole behavior is suicidal. There's a lot of behaviors that are suicidal.
That's
really,
true.
you know.
That's true.
Whenever we don't work at our best, whenever we just try to take the easy way out, whenever we don't help ourselves to be the best that we can be, all that other kind of behavior, including illegal behavior, any illegal behavior is a choice that people make. And they're really doing suicidal behavior and suicidal choices because they could end up being dead or certainly in prison for a long time. So there's many, many different kind of behaviors that are suicidal in nature because they really are not in the behalf of the person that is doing it.
More in just a couple of minutes after these messages.
Why would you bully me?
Why would you bully me?
Why would you bully me?
Because it makes you feel cool? Because I'm different?
Do I touch a nerve?
Does making me feel bad make you feel good?
Why?
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 Bullying hurts. Bullying abuses. Bullying kills. Why would you bully me?
Where is the bus? I'm late. My mum's gonna kill me. It's really dark. I always feel like someone's watching me. I'm gonna fail my driving test. I'm dropping to pass maths. I'm never gonna get those essays done by Monday. Am I going to get enough points in leaving? Why don't guys like me? They're just hanging out with me out of pity. I just want to talk to someone. I should be studying, but I can't. I'm going to fail in the research. Will's going to break up with me. Why can't they leave me alone? I can't face school tomorrow.
We all have problems. It's how we deal with them that makes us different. If negative thoughts are overwhelming you, you can always talk to a friend, a parent, a teacher, a guidance counsellor, or a healthcare professional. Control your problems.
All right, thank you. We're back now. Dr. Morgan, let's talk about something that we haven't discussed yet. How can one find a licensed therapist and a mental health person? What do they do? Is it something they can just pick up the phone and call somebody, or does it take some effort?
First, check with your health insurance. There's a behavioral health portion of your health insurance. And so go there, and that'll be able to tell you what the copay would be. It would tell you how many sessions you're allowed. Most of the time, it can be unlimited, as much as you need, whatever's necessary. It can even tell you the mental health therapists that take your insurance.
Well, how many meetings could one person plan on? Because of course, it kind of, I would say, gets rather expensive. What can you add on that?
It just depends on what you're working on. Some people need for years. Other people, 8 sessions and they feel like their problems are solved. So it depends really on the client, although the therapist has to try to convince the client of the fact that they do need mental health care. Many times I've not been able to convince somebody, even though they obviously needed it, but they didn't want to be part of it. And so that's up to them. I tried to explain why, but I couldn't convince the person. And since it is a commitment, most generally on a weekly basis, it is a commitment that people have to be willing to do, and nothing happens overnight. You're really trying to change how you think. Cognitive behavioral therapy is about changing how you think. You always have a thought first before a feeling. And so whatever you're thinking is then going to transmit into a feeling. And so if you're trying to change your feeling, you have to change your thinking first. And so you have to unlearn the thoughts that you have that are not productive, that don't serve you, and relearn new ways of thinking. So that takes a lot of time because it's a lot of repetition, reinforcement done on a weekly basis. Therapy is really best done on a weekly basis, not even every other week. On a weekly basis is really how it's supposed to be done.
What about folks that don't have a lot of money? Is there any such thing as free sessions?
You may have free sessions if your company has an employee assistance program, and that you can find out about in your human resource development department. They would know that. They may even help you find a therapist, or they may assign you to a therapist. Generally, employee assistance, I've done many things with the federal government. They're really quite generous in the number of sessions they give. The employee assistance programs pay me directly, but the client doesn't have to pay anything. So, and then after they're done with those sessions, then their insurance would take over for them. Yes, mental health therapy is $150 a session, usually, if insurance is not used. And so therefore, whenever you are calling somebody, please ask them, do they take your insurance, is almost the first thing you have to ask. Because if they don't, well, then you'll be paying, that amount of money, and it really adds up. There's also deductibles that you have to look at. So most people really do need to use insurance because they can't afford $150 a week for weekly, at least 52 times for the year. That adds up.
Well, besides having insurance benefits and finding therapists through insurance and so forth, what about if they don't have anything? How can they find a good therapist?
Psychology Today is a very good place to find a therapist. Therapists have profiles there, and so you can read their profiles and see what they specialize in. Psychology Today will give you the phone number of a therapist that you are selecting. You can maybe even contact a therapist. This happens with me all the time. People contact me through Psychology Today, and so I then get an email from them first and contact them, and then we go on from there. Also, the Greater Washington Society of Clinical Social Work also has a website that you can go to that has social workers listed that could be, appropriate to work with you. But everyone has to have a license in Virginia to provide mental health care.
What about the county? Can the county come in on that and help somebody who doesn't have insurance that needs a therapist? And will that therapist be able to take their case over? Or does it have to be something where the therapist will decide if that person is a good fit or not? Because I know you can't turn everybody away, but you also can't accept everybody.
Well, we're going to be visiting the Merrifield Center, where you can go and be seen on a sliding scale based on how much you can afford. There's also other agencies in the Northern Virginia area, Family Services being one, the Vienna Women's Center being another, that do provide mental health services at a reduced fee. And so feel free to go to those places too. When you select a therapist, it's a very sensitive process. And you really, to be kind to yourself, you really should choose several that specialize in what you're having difficulty with, and then interview them on the phone. Call them, tell them about yourself, ask them questions about what you saw in their profile, and really the one that you feel the most comfortable with. Most therapists will allow you to spend 15 minutes talking with them, that they will not, charge you for that. And so I know how hard it is to make a phone call for mental health care. Some people have waited for years. The person I just mentioned, Jenny, waited for years, 2 years before she finally called me. And she called me because someone else that I saw works with her and has similar issues. So word of mouth is, of course, the best way to find someone.
Thank you very much for joining us on our first show. We know some of our viewers have many questions about mental health, so Dr. Morgan and I are asking you to send emails to us about your concerns and questions. Please send your questions to the email address below, and we promise to present that question on our next show. And on our next show, Dr. Morgan will be visiting the Merrifield Center, where she will be interviewing several employees who are able to handle our mental health problems. And just remember, you can find help. Dr. Morgan and I want to thank you for tuning in. This is Lee Morgan. Have a wonderful day.